Welcome to the OpenTreasury podcast, your go-to source for the latest news and analysis in corporate cash and treasury management. This show is brought to you by CTMfile.com and the Treasury News Network, where Treasury professionals learn and share the information that matters most. And now your host, Jack Large.
Hello and welcome to our second OpenTreasury podcast from Strategic Treasurer. I'm Jack Large, editor of CTMfile, and I'm with Craig Jeffery, managing partner at Strategic Treasurer.
Good to be with you, Jack.
Great stuff. So now it's the 1st of September. Boy, has the time flown by. And we are going to be reviewing the latest Treasury news and developments. Basically, three things we're going to be focusing on. The first one is going to be about Deutsche Bank's webchat, fascinating webchat, very important webchat about how to optimize the simultaneous coordination of cash and FX management. Now, this is something that people have ignored for years, but have struggled with and not really found a solution. Well, Deutsche have a solution now that actually allows you to simultaneously optimize both your cash and your FX management. The problem is that they have conflicting differences where you want to do maximum cash flow, but on foreign exchange you don't want to move it because of the foreign exchange. And it's the balancing of these two things is the most important. And it can only be done in an automated way because FX risk management can lead to cash settlements that negatively impact cash and so on. What they've got is a multi-currency cash concentration system where effectively they say, put you in the cockpit and you get empowerment through automation of everything so you can optimize your target balance at the same time as you can optimize your percentage deviation on your FX. I was a bit surprised by this. Well, I was astonished actually. And Jay Hoffman, he said, well, actually, Jack, what was interesting was when COVID really hit, people rang us up and said, well, what's going to break? What have we got to change? And they said, nothing. It's all automated. The whole process is automated. Then we got into discussion about the level of automation and so on. But where are you coming from on this, Craig? Because we've got a conflicting of disciplines.
I really enjoyed that web discussion you had with Jay. The issue of, if you optimize a component of a broader process, like if you optimize liquidity management or you optimize FX risk management, in isolation, you certainly suboptimize the whole activity. And this was the key point of your discussion with him, is that liquidity management is the foundation for cash management. And this more comprehensive view, looking across both disciplines, is essential for optimization as opposed to a pure trade-off. And your discussion about, what I would refer to as a comprehensive look and a coordinated look of these two things together is essential and is enabled by tech. And then the example like you gave on with COVID is, some of these organizations, it's already realized the benefit of pulling these two together. That was a key part of what I saw and took away from your dialogue with him.
The other piece that I took away, and it became more and more important the more we worked on this, is that there need to be two levels of control, the level of the overall strategic control and then tactical parameters that you can change from time to time as things move, as trade flows move and so on, even though the generics of the flows don't change. What we came to a conclusion was that we need a second web chat on how you automate and what level of automation is required and what's the best way of automating. So we're going to have a follow-up web chat on how you balance the different dynamics in full automation, because these cash flow routines, these foreign exchange routines, if they're all automated, you need a balance. So the follow-up web chat's going to be useful. Okay, so moving on, again, we're talking about essentially real time, but Deutsche Bank put it very nicely. They put real time in inverted commas, saying it's as instant as you can get it. You can practically get not real time. And Citibank had a lovely article which we reviewed and summarized on how to map the route to real-time liquidity. They had a 20-step process to map the different pieces. Very useful, I thought. What do you think here, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I like how you described it as, the putting stuff in inverse quotes or quoting real time. This idea of, well, just like our last discussion is there's this movement to an end-to-end view of liquidity and risk management by taking everything together. There's also this ongoing development in a real-time environment. It used to be companies close their books, day 10, 15, or 20, and they've continued to push the closing to 6 days, 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, and that's the accounting time frame. Real time in Treasury has always at least been prior day, and now it becomes current day at different points in time, faster and faster to, approaching true real time. And then there's all these elements that have to get caught up, because if you have the fastest tech, but you don't get access to the data, except every, 4 hours, the gating item is the amount of time. This checklist of how do I integrate my bank data, and then how do I achieve better insights, especially as I'm tapping other areas of the organization, is, I think you use the term holy grail. I mean, that's really where things are going. If it's not instantaneous time, it is very quickly during the same day, and there's a lot of benefits to be gained from that.
On a personal note, the sort of weekends get in the way a bit, and you expect some money to arrive through the clearings the same day, but it's Saturday. Oh dear, I'm not going to get it until Monday. But if you look at other clearings, they do it instantaneously. So it's managing all the different pieces, which is where full automation, it becomes more and more desirable. But, and the big but is, how much control do you lose? Is it out of control? Which comes back to our second web chat with Deutsche. Moving on, we looked at something that's come up in a number of different ways: sustainable investment and monitoring. Ben Poole did a nice review of how the BIS and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority are investigating how to tokenize green bonds. But this is just an example of how the world is having to get to grips with, the investment world is having to get to grips with sensible investing, taking into account the impact on the environment and on climate change. This is becoming a big problem, isn't it, Craig? We're starting to see some serious problems emerging here.
The issue of sustainable investing, some of the ESG activities, we've seen that. It seemed like a handful or a dozen organizations were focused on this. If we go back about 10 years ago, larger organizations, treasury organizations, taking advantage of that, I think primarily with the big data center oriented companies, replacing their energy that they run the data centers. Even though they might need to use less green, they would apply enough green energy to more than offset what they did. And I think that was kind of the earlier days. And what we've seen is this slow, continued movement towards, well, what you might refer to as sustainable investment, I think, as you were talking about that. So I think there's an ongoing growth of it, like a slow rolling down the hill of what goes on. So I think that's that's really interesting to see, both in the investment space and, the combination of what makes sense ecologically and economically. And when those two marry, it seems like that's addressing both sides.
Yeah, and the issue increasingly from investors' point of view is how the hell do you measure the impact of the company I'm investing in? And so more and more metrics are being developed to measure the impact. One of the latest is something we reviewed, which is the Water Impact Index, where you look at the overall impact across all sorts of different areas of what water resources do they require and what's the quantity and the quality of what they require. And this to me sounds horrendous, but unless investors get accurate recording of what they're investing in, they're increasingly not going to invest. So these registrations, these indices are going to become more important. My question, though, for you is, how do you manage, if you're a corporate treasury, all the different indexes that are appearing around in all sorts of different ways?
That is a difficult question. I would rather ask you that question, but I think what people are doing when their board is requiring this type of information is to understand how it can be measured, and this idea of the expectation is that it increases over time. I think it follows with any time there's not necessarily an easy standard, is to know that it's increasing, figure out ways to report it, and then move forward. So I don't really have a good answer for that, Jack. You may have a better one, but it seems like...
It seems to me that there needs to be a debate about this, and maybe we should host a combination of suppliers and corporate treasurers to discuss this, because it's a major problem and it's getting worse. I mean, there's even a metric for measuring the level of rewilding and how you can get investment in rewilding because it's measured. Amazing. Anyway, that's enough of that for now. So it was an interesting couple of weeks. We've got more to come on all sorts of different things, including cyber currencies and a whole range of problems they're creating. Anyway, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jack.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.